Hi, you have reached Professor Haim Shore podcast. In this episode, there was evening and there was morning, Genesis 1, a different interpretation.
And there was evening and there was morning, Genesis 1, a different interpretation. The known verse from the first chapter of Genesis appears therein, not surprisingly, 6 times. The 2 central words of the verse, which confer on it its meaning, are boker, morning in biblical Hebrew, and erev, evening. However, their order of appearance in the verse is bizarre. And there was evening, and there was morning one day, Genesis 1 verse 5. This is logically flawed, and same applies to all other 5 variations of the verse. The correct articulation should be, and there was morning, and there was evening one day. Perhaps the verse is misconstrued by us? Is there an alternative interpretation that may remove the logical flaw inherent to current interpretation? In this post and the allied podcast, we offer a new interpretation. The latter integrates well with the creation narrative, as unfolding in Genesis 1, and, astoundingly, it also comports well with current scientific knowledge of the Big Bang and its aftermath. Ultimately, the new interpretation also explains why the same 2 words, erev and boker, stand for evening and morning, respectively, in traditional interpretations of the verse. We base the new interpretation on a basic root analysis of the 2 words and support it by numerous other verses in the Jewish Bible, where same roots appear in a context utterly divorced from the traditional meaning as evening and morning, yet in context that is consistent with the new interpretation. Therefore, both erev and boker, and their respective roots, are henceforth discussed with no relationship whatsoever to their acceptable meanings, as evening and morning, respectively. We start with erev. This word, and other words of same root, appear over 150 times in the Bible. The Hebrew root of erev corresponds to erb in English. Most times, the root is associated with evening, but not uniquely so. Another common usage relates to mixing or mixture. Thus, erev rav, literally much mixture, stands for a mixture of tribes. Arav stands for a mixture of animals, one of the 10 plights of Egypt. Letatarev means to mix together. In other words, erev, in biblical Hebrew, simply means mixture. Not surprisingly, the time of day when darkness starts to crawl over earth is also called erev in Hebrew. Let us next consider boker. Traditionally, the word means morning. We might be astonished to learn that its root is tightly linked to erev, when the latter is interpreted as mixture. Furthermore, as we shall soon realize, the root of boker diametrically represents the opposite of erev, when the latter is interpreted as mixture. Let us analyze usage, in various biblical Hebrew words, of the root of boker, bkr. The grammatical structure of boker is the same as kodesh, month, in Hebrew. The verb associated with kodesh is lekadesh, meaning to renew. One may understand why month in Hebrew implies renewal. The Hebrew calendar is based on the lunar, moon-based month, with some periodical adjustments to keep it in tune with the solar calendar, sun-based calendar. As lekadesh is associated with kodesh, the respective verb, associated with boker, is levaker. Among other related meanings, levaker in biblical Hebrew means to seek out, namely, to make something that is mixed, distinct, and separate. For example, from Collins' Concise Dictionary. She sought out her friend from among the crowd. A typical example for the use of levaker, sharing same root with boker, is found in Leviticus. The verse describes donation of an animal to be sacrificed to Jehovah. The verse addresses the donor and relates to his animal donation, Leviticus 27 verse 33. He must not seek out, lo yevaker, the good from the bad or make any substitution. If he does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute become holy and cannot be redeemed. In other words, if the donated animal is defective, impaired in some way, the donor must not distinguish the good from the bad, or make substitution, so that the sacrifice includes only good parts of the animal. The latter must be sacrificed in its totality. Similarly, refer to Leviticus 13 verse 36, or Ezekiel 34 verses 11 to 12. We realize that, according to the new interpretation based on root analysis, Erev and Boker are inherently connected, diametrically representing two opposite states. Erev describes a state of mixture. Boker describes a state that is the outcome of sorting out the mixture into its individual constituents, rendering them distinct, separate from the crowd, the mixture. In short, Boker describes a new state, where constituents of the mixture stand each on its own, materializing to full fruition as a result of the act of Baccara, seeking out the ingredients of the mixture. With this new insight, based on root analysis of the two words, Erev and Boker, the well-known verse, "And there was evening and there was morning," acquires a completely new meaning. It may more precisely be re-articulated as follows. There was mixture, Erev, and then there was non-mixture, Boker, a new state where the mixture is dissolved, sorted out into its individual constituents. We again note that the traditional interpretation, "and there was evening, and there was morning one day," and other versions of same verse, this interpretation is logically flawed. The morning appears before the evening, to define a day, not the other way around. With the new interpretation, this logical flaw disappears since time is appropriately preserved. Is the new interpretation consistent with the general description of creation, as unfolding in Genesis creation narrative? Indeed, very much so. In Genesis creation narrative, as unfolding in the first chapter of Genesis, the word create, bara, appears not 6 times, as might be expected, but only twice. It first appears in Genesis 1 verse 1 as an overall statement of all that have been created. In the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1 verse 1. The second time creation is mentioned in Genesis creation narrative relates to the human species, Genesis 1 verse 27. So Elohim created mankind in his own image, in the image of Elohim created he him, male and female he created them. One may wonder, if creation had happened in the beginning, Genesis 1 verse 1, and then on the 6th day, Genesis 1 verse 27, what has the divine being engaged in the rest of the 6 days, where creation is not at all mentioned? The surprising answer is embedded in the two words, Erev and Boker, based on their new interpretation, based on their root analysis. In the other days, when no creation is specified, Genesis creation narrative describes, individually for each day, how Elohim, by divine utterance, has turned Erev, a state of mixture, into Boker, a state of non-mixture, individual parts sorted out from the mixture. In other words, in most of the creation narrative of Genesis 1, the divine separates the mixture, created in the beginning, into its distinct individual elements, materializing them from the uniform mixture into which they were initially embedded. How does this interpretation comport with modern science? Indeed, surprisingly well. The two words, Erev and Boker, as newly interpreted, are extremely consistent with how the Big Bang and its aftermath in the first few seconds of existence are currently described by science. A central element in this description is the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMBR. This radiation is a relic of the Big Bang and its immediate aftermath. The uniformity of the radiation across the universe testifies that in the beginning the universe was extremely uniform. This uniformity is echoed in the Bible, describing the just created physical world, the earth, Genesis 1 verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, tohu vavohu. Using root analysis of the two Hebrew words, tohu and vohu, let us make sense of this verse and find out what it really conveys. Science describes the first few seconds after the Big Bang as extremely uniform. Nothing is yet distinct, there is no information to observe. This scientific description is reflected in tohu and bohu. The Bible describes the just created world as being in a state that whatever an observer at the time would observe, he or she will be bewildered, litihat, to wonder, Hebrew verb linked to tohu. Also, the imaginary observer would look around purposelessly, livihat, Hebrew verb linked to bohu. Both descriptions allude to an observer, bewildered and looking around purposelessly. Why? Because there is no information, nothing to observe that might help making sense of the observed, just as in a desert. We have come to the end of our exploration journey regarding creation of the earth, as alluded to in Genesis 1. We realized that in most days of creation, the divine sorted out, by uttering a divine command, that which was created in the beginning. We now address the second creation, that of humankind, on the sixth day of creation, Genesis 1 verse 27. Humankind was not created when God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1 verse 1. Otherwise, the word created would not be repeated describing creation of mankind, Genesis 1:27. Since creation first alludes to the heavens and the earth, and only later to humankind, we, human beings, are doomed to repeat, in our own lives, the same process, as described, regarding the earth in the first 5 days of Genesis creation, and some also on the sixth day. According to the creation narrative, the physical world, the earth, has moved, from one day to the next, from a vague mixture, Erev, tohu vavohu, into its visible distinct constituents, Boker, turning the potential into observable reality. We, human beings, who were separately created, are doomed to repeat the same process as the earth. Exercising free will, we are doomed to sort out the hidden faceless mixture, residing within us from infancy, into observable, distinct and separate personality and character. Once we do that, transforming the potential, lurking within us in a mixture form, into the I or me which we have grown up to become. Once we do that, then, and only then, may we offer our own creation, our own non-mixed unique self, to the world, to be of benefit to the rest of humanity, and to all other creatures living on the surface of planet Earth.
Thank you for listening. Until the next episode, goodbye.